Hello, everybody, and welcome to the User Research Strategist podcast. I'm your host, Nikki, and today I have Kamila Boudova with us, who we're going to be talking about the fascinating topic of freelancing and selling yourself as a user research freelancer. Hi, Kamila.
Hi, Nikki. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited to dive into this topic in particular. It's one that's super near and dear to my heart as a consultant freelancer myself, and I love to hear from other freelancers. But before we get into this amazingly interesting topic, would you just give a quick introduction for our audience?
Absolutely. So thank you again. Very happy to be here. My name is Kamila. I work as a user researcher. I have a background in anthropology and human ethology. But after graduating, I ended up somehow in management consulting. And although it was a super great experience, I learned a lot about businesses. I really missed research. I miss diving deeper and understanding people's behavior. So when I learned that there is something like user research, I felt like, yes, this is it. This is my career path. And I started in-house in a software company. And, after a big tech layoffs and the company merged with another company, I stood in front of a decision whether I want to look for another job or actually try out freelancing. And that's what I did. And yeah, it's already for 2 years and I like it.
Amazing. Yeah, I have that same feeling that you had where when I found out user research existed, I was like, oh my goodness, there is a job that does this. This is amazing.
Yes, exactly. Such a breakthrough, like, yes, this is it.
Yeah. So I'd love to hear because you talk about standing up in front of that decision of looking for another job and getting into freelancing. Can you talk through your thought process and how you weighed that decision a little bit more? Because I'm sure a lot of people might be thinking the same thing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. I have to say that I was super lucky that my transition was somehow gradual because I had the opportunity to work on some projects with some clients already during my employment while I still was like in-house researcher. So I was able to build some kind of network during that time. And it wasn't like, straight line. And now I have to start like looking for clients. So that would be for sure something that I would recommend and also that helped a lot. But of course, it was still tough decision because I was so unsure, like, am I going to be successful? Am I going to have ongoing clients? But then on the other hand, I saw, yes, I can try it out. I can have the freedom. And if it doesn't work out, I still can go and look for a job, right? It's not permanent decision.
Yeah, I love that because I think people get stuck in this thought process. I do too, of like, if I go down this path, I could never go down that other one again. Whereas I've switched between freelance and in-house several times now.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and it's possible.
Super possible. Plenty of people do it. And I say that everybody should try all of these different things because you just learn so many different skills.
Yes, 100%.
Do you want to get all of your user research questions answered all while hanging out on your couch in sweatpants? No need to join any live webinars and hope that your question gets answered. No need to Google a million different things and sift through some scattered advice that you don't really know is valid or reliable. Not anymore. I know it sounds too good to be true, but I promise it isn't, because if you become a paid Substack subscriber, you get access immediately to a community filled with user researchers that I am in every single day answering questions. Not only can you hang out on your couch, feel less alone as a user researcher, and get all of your questions answered, not only by an expert, but by a bunch of other user researchers with amazing perspectives and experience, you can do all of that on your couch in sweatpants, and I will be alongside there with you every step of the way. So join my paid Substack, get immediate access, and we can relax together solving all of your user research problems. See you there. So I'd love to hear, you're 2 years into this. What's the most surprising thing that you found being a freelance user researcher?
I thought about this question a lot and I had to laugh because, first of all, I would say how much of freelancing is actually not research. You have to learn a lot more than that. Taxes, for example, how much of project management you have to do, how much chasing stakeholders you have to do, how much self-discipline you have to have. And it's, and then you find yourself, oh, like I actually do just a little bit of research, but I do a lot of admin stuff. And the second thing that was a really challenging, although I worked remotely before, I found out how lonely it can be if you're not proactive and if you do not chase people, you don't get randomly invited to a stand-up, right? And you're there alone planning your own projects. So it can be very lonely and you have to take care of yourself for sure.
Absolutely. I find that very similar feeling. Sometimes you're kind of sitting alone, and I have weeks. So I have call weeks and non-call weeks. And sometimes on the non-call weeks where I'm doing deep work, I'm like, I haven't spoken to anybody today.
Which can be sometimes a very good thing,
Yes.
right? It can be very nice, but there are the days where you're like, oh, I'm so alone.
Like talking to my pets, and I'm like, I don't think this is the replacement.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I love what you said about you're a freelance user researcher, but only a part of the job of a freelancer is research. It's not the whole thing. You're not just doing research all
Yeah.
the time. Your project management, your admin, your accounting and finances,
Yeah.
your marketing. And so I'm wondering, for somebody who's thinking about getting into freelancing, can you talk a little bit more about the different hats you wear and how you
Mm.
wear them? And I think specifically people are really wondering about things like marketing yourself or selling yourself as a freelancer.
To be honest, I think that, for sure, I wouldn't recommend it to entry level people because what I see with entry level researchers, they usually lack, and that's absolutely natural. I did too. The confidence to push back to like when a client or even your colleague product manager comes to you and says, oh, I want you to run a usability test or I want you to run a quick survey, you don't have the confidence and experience to say, we shouldn't do that. We should do this and that. So, and you have to do that a lot when freelancing. So, really, if you're on that level where you're confident and you know that this is the path for you, I would totally recommend having things ready, like case studies, portfolio, website, maybe, which I am guilty of not having yet. But what paid off is having something tangible to showcase your clients. When I come to a client for the first time, when we have the first, meeting, I try to avoid such fluffy words as like user needs and expectations. Like we as researchers, we understand that, but people who are in business and they are very numbers and results oriented, they want to see the impact. So having, something you can show and you can present your impact is super powerful in that selling strategy.
Yeah, I love that. And it resonates so much with the experience that I've had as well, is you can go in there and talk about, and this is what I did when I started, user needs and unmet needs and goals and pain points and all this stuff. And people are like, great, but what does that mean? Because usually when you go in, you're not talking to a group of researchers who are already bought in. You're talking to very different people who, as you said, are very business oriented, very numbers oriented. And so I'm curious, when you do talk about that impact, are you talking about certain metrics, or are you trying to cater your case studies to what that project might look like or that particular company might want from you?
I think the latter, because when it comes to metrics, I'm trying to follow whatever metrics they have inside of the company. So I don't think that's the first thing we talk about. I don't want to push my metrics on them, but definitely I'm trying to pick a project that might be similar to either what they do or what similar to the problem they have, and really, find the connecting clients we can build on. And so they can really, understand and feel like, oh yes, like I know what she's talking about now, and I might even understand when she talks about needs right now. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. So presenting something that they can connect with that's like
Yes.
relevant to them, their problem or the industry or yeah, that space.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And really emphasizing the impact because people usually, those people really don't care if you talked to 8 people and how you did your affinity diagram. They want to see if you increased revenue or increased engagement of users in the participant space. But yeah, like really showcasing the impact is super important.
Yeah, I used to do almost like present to them a case study like I would maybe my stakeholders, but in the bad way of going through and being like, yeah, for this, I did qualitative research, one-on-one interviews, which by the way, you need this sample size and
Yeah.
da-da-da, and this is the participant pool. And, we had Joe and Mary and, and all these people. And now I actually start with the impact.
Yeah.
And it's been really helpful because you grab their attention at the beginning of the meeting rather than at the end.
Absolutely. And I think like it also spirals the discussion. I always say, even with clients, but I did that also in-house, but with the client work, it's, I think, I wouldn't say more important, but talking, like I always say, it's not for me, it's the results, it's for you. Like you should be the ones discussing them because you need them to follow up with your work. So really, when you start with impact, it can spiral up a discussion and, tangible outcomes. And then it's much easier for you to showcase the impact in the following project, right?
Yeah, yeah, of course. I love that. And I love that idea of it sparking discussion because I know a lot of the times when I can go in, if people aren't really sure what researchers do, I might get a brief or I might get, a message that is so vague. And I'm like, I have no idea what you want to do or
Yeah,
why you need me. So those clarifying questions and those discussions are so important.
100%. Yeah.
Hey everyone, I have been taking some business courses recently and am launching a new membership that's all about how user researchers can become more business savvy, more strategic, and more of a business partner in their organizations. One of the biggest questions that I get asked is, hey, my organization isn't really mature. It has like a low user research maturity level. Please do not let the maturity of your organization dictate your user research career. That's what I did because I was in a lower user research maturity, I kind of let myself stagnate and I didn't really learn new things. And with that, my skills kind of like deteriorated. I lost a lot of time that I could have used to learn really, really important skills because they weren't necessarily applicable to my organization at that time. But guess what? I got fired. And then it didn't really matter what maturity level my organization was at because I was no longer there. And I wished that I had taken the time to learn some of these skills because they would have been applicable at the next places that I went into. I know that it can be hard sometimes and frustrating when you're in a low maturity organization and you want to push things, you want to learn new things, but please, please, please don't let your current organization and their levels of maturity impact your future career because I promise you, you will not be there forever and you will need the skills that you need to learn in the future. Promise, 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 especially with the user research industry changing and us hopefully moving into that more strategic space and operating more as business partners and innovation partners to our organizations. Also, if you want more details on my membership and how to become a little bit more business oriented as a researcher, check out the link that I have and I hope that helps. I think most people will be curious if you're okay talking about this. But for instance, I tend to charge a project-based rate, but
Mhm.
people don't know what to do and like what that looks like. And do you have a favorite way of charging? Is it hourly? Is it day rate? Is it project rate?
Honestly, that was something I struggled with a lot at the beginning because I didn't know that there was something like project-based rate. And I found out way later when I started like listening to other people who freelance, and I was already on hourly rate. Looking back, if I know that I'm going to do an easy project like usability testing or heuristic evaluation. And I know it's like super straightforward. I wouldn't do hourly rate. I would do a project-based rate. But when it comes to money, and yes, I'm super comfortable talking about it, I think what people should do when thinking about it, how much should I charge? First of all, count your expenses. And it's not just about the expense, like the mandatory expenses, but it's also about how often do you want to take vacation? How often do you want to do things that make you actually happy, like doing sports or, I don't know, going out with friends? And count everything in, because that should be your minimum hour rate, right? And yeah, I did a mistake because I'm terrible in math. I had to then correct it, but good news is that it's possible. But if I knew from the beginning, I would do a lot of things different.
Me too. I'm very similar in that I'm horrible at math. So I thought of things like only the mandatory things. I was like, well, this is rent, this is what I pay for in utilities and groceries and my pets, and I didn't think of other things like here. I have Social Security that I have to pay on behalf of me as an employer and as an employee because I'm both. And you have to think about taxes and budgeting. So there's a lot more things that might get hidden in your in-house paychecks, because I know a lot of, if you work at a company, they'll take those things out and you don't even see them, but you don't see them. So you don't have to necessarily budget for them. So I always tell people, think of that annual salary that you would get and want at a company and work backwards from there. Because a lot of times we just kind of go and we're like, well, what is everybody else charging? And it's like, well, everybody else is very different than you.
Yeah, 100%. And, it can cause a lot of stress if you're not prepared for that. Because I remember when I first went on vacation and I went into thinking not only I'm paying for the vacation, but I'm paying double because I'm not taking paid leave. Right. And so every vacation day costs me double, which is absolutely wrong thinking if you want to freelance, because otherwise you will never take vacation. But yeah, it takes time. And if you have the information from the beginning, or at least you're trying to talk to people who freelance and you're not just focusing on, oh, I'm going to be on the beach in Thailand working 2 hours a day, which is not the case, then you might have more realistic viewpoint.
Yeah, I'm so happy you brought that up because it is something that we have to think about as freelancers. Every day that we're not working, we're not making money.
Yeah.
And that's just, yeah, that's just how it is. And, sick days even, if you're sick and you can't do the same things that you might do when you're not sick. And it's thinking about factoring all of those in, because yeah, you can't take paid leave from your freelance job, but you can set yourself up so that you can take it. So it's being very mindful and thoughtful. And yeah, those are great tips. And I'm wondering, as one of the last questions as we get closer to our time, how do you go about, or are there any tips that you have for finding clients? Because I know that that's a huge thing for people, is how do I find people to work with?
It is tough, but because I also do mentoring in my free time, and people come in and ask about how do I get the free job. And I think it's kind of similar because you have to look for the opportunities yourself, and they are there. You can't sit at home and thinking someone will, write in your LinkedIn DMs and say, oh, we waited for you the whole life. You have to find those opportunities, and they are there. So either meetups, you have a lot of offline opportunities to network, but also feel free to reach out to the companies on your own. Try to offer that you can do something for them, and you can do UX audit, which is bare minimum. It won't take long, but you can already showcase something, which I talked, before about. It's about being proactive. And then, if you're lucky enough, it will snowball because, word of mouth, that's the best thing.
Yeah, I always say word of mouth as well. And going and being super proactive. So for instance, here in Jersey, I have people that they can sign up for a heuristic evaluation report for free from
Mhm.
me, and I get it back to them in 2 days, 2 business days. And yes, it's free, but it's super high level, so it's really low lift, but I can show them value and then
Yeah.
they want more.
Yeah,
So it's a really
exactly.
great way of showcasing, hey, I'm not just annoying you, being like, please work with me. It's more like, hey, I've already provided you some value and I'm interested in you. Do you want to work together and get even more information from me?
Right. And
Yeah.
from your experience, right, they usually reach out because they want more. It's not that your work goes to nowhere.
No, usually not. I would say maybe 70-80% of people will reach back out and say, yeah, what else is in this report? Can we get the
Yeah,
more in-depth one and pay X amount of money for that more in-depth report? And then that, as you said, the snowball, start with that. And I would say that the other percentage of people, sometimes I get ghosted, but most of the time it's like, hey, this isn't the right time because of budget, but then your name is there. And
absolutely.
magically, sometimes they will. That's when you do get those DMs, right? When
Yeah.
you've reached out already.
Yeah, true. Like when you're already on that level, then sometimes you get a DM, but at the beginning you have to be proactive.
I know that I have a hard time sometimes with like being alone in that self-discipline. Do you have any tips for people for honing in and being able to be disciplined with work when you are your own boss? And essentially, you could go sit on the couch and watch movies all day if you wanted to.
Sometimes I do.
Yeah, me too.
For me, it's only hard work. First of all, set up your deadlines. I have to agree with the client on a deadline. If I don't have a deadline, that's way more difficult. Also, if people struggle with phone addiction or phone distractions, I would totally recommend AppBlock, which is a product I also work on, but it basically blocks your apps on your phone or whatever you want to get blocked. So that helps not to get distracted. But yeah, like making a tight schedule, like write it down, be be disciplined. You have to be hard on yourself. There is no easy way around it. And set deadlines and don't push them elsewhere. Just keep the deadlines.
I had a client the other day where I was like, oh, yeah, what's the deadline? And they're like, oh, we don't really have one. And I was like,
Yeah,
no, we're setting one. I don't care
right.
if you do anything with the research in that deadline, but I need a deadline.
Right. Or like I sometimes I feel like when I always do like a presentation of my report, right? Like turning in the results and we discuss them. And when a client writes me, "Oh, I have to postpone it in a week," I'm like, "Okay."
Yeah. Yeah.
And then it's very difficult to, be strict.
Yeah. That's when you go and watch the movies.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, Camilla, this was amazing. I really enjoyed it. And I'm wondering, what is your number one tip, the number one thing that people can take away from today's call if they're thinking about freelancing, becoming a freelance researcher, or maybe if they even are already?
My number one advice would be really think it through. Because if you already know that you don't enjoy stakeholder management, be sure you're going to do it as freelancer and talk to people who freelance and, talk about challenges. Number two, get your materials ready. If you're working already on a project and you're thinking about freelancing, sit down and write the case study because then you won't have to spend weeks of putting your materials together.
Yeah. So it's almost like get ready before.
Yeah,
Yeah. Before.
yeah, 100%, 100%, because you can't do it without it. You have to have something.
Absolutely. This has been, wow, thank you. This has been so amazing. I'm going to link in the show notes to your LinkedIn. And you also mentioned you're on ADP list mentoring people. So I will
Right.
link that in as well.
Right.
And I will also throw in a link to AppBlock, which is
Thank
something
you.
that I am 100% going to try.
Thank you so much. It was so lovely talking to you.
Thank
I'm
you.
I'm pleased.
Amazing. Yeah, it was so nice. Thank you. And yeah, thank you to everybody who's listening. And we'll see you again soon.